Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we check out the other adaptation of Return of the Jedi in this episode. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler, and of course we're looking at this time the comic adaptation of Return of the Jedi from Marvel Comics. This is by Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson, the team best known for the newspaper strips. Now, this entire storyline is a little bit unusual in terms of the way that Marvel decided to handle it. You may recall that the first 6 issues of the Marvel series were the adaptation of A New Hope. Then they introduced some new stories. We also then had issues 39 through 44, which were the adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back, still within the same numbering as the series itself. That is not going to wind up being the case here for Return of the Jedi. Instead, Return of the Jedi is a story that's handled as its own miniseries of 4 issues. Now, this 4-issue miniseries was being released in June, July, August, and September of 1983. So it doesn't start until the month after Return of the Jedi has already been in theaters at this point. It's being released around the same time as the end of the storyline on Iskalon, right? So the Iskalon Effect title and R2-D2 to the Rescue. It's in the same month, the first issue is, as R2-D2 to the Rescue. And it continues on all the way through September, which is when we get the issue The Big Con. So the Marvel series isn't ready for Return of the Jedi yet. They're still building up to it at this point. They won't be ready for it until the issue entitled Ellie. So what we have here is sort of the Marvel series still stuck in the past, then Return of the Jedi getting its own adaptation, which I'm thinking the reason why they did as a miniseries was because they weren't ready for it yet, so that then when that's done, they will have been caught up, and then they can pick up with post-Return of the Jedi EU stories, which will be a first of that type of story in all of Star Wars publishing. But for now, we're in this odd situation when it comes to Return of the Jedi being its own little mini-series. It's also by a different creative team, Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson from the newspaper strips. Archie Goodwin, of course, was one of the earliest writers on this series after Roy Thomas. He had left. Now he is back for this adaptation, as is Al Williamson. Now, again, weird ways that this is being released. I'll show you a couple things. First off, what the original issues looked like. This is issue number 1. This is a story entitled In the Hands of Jabba the Hutt. We then have issue number 2, The Emperor Commands. That's followed by issue number 3, Mission to Endor. And then we have issue number 4, The Final Duel. Kind of a thematic series here, the way the covers just have, a few characters at a time and such. Now, I will say that this was my first Star Wars comic book ever as a child. When I was a little kid, it was the mommy, please, can I have, at the grocery store kind of stuff. And even before I had that issue Diplomacy that I think I've shown before, this was the first Star Wars comic I ever owned. And no, this is not the nice, pristine copy that I just showed you. That's this one. This has seen better days. It is all kinds of beat up, edge wear. It's got a tear at the bottom. And I was one who would take this and cut out the last few pages, because what they did was they ended these with art, right? So you would end the main story, then there's the little art page there. Well, back in the day, I kept this scrapbook full of Star Wars stuff, mostly including the photos and such, from Bantha Tracks, the fan club, and whatnot. But I basically just cut out that picture of Boba Fett and said, hey, I want to have that as a page of my scrapbook. So as a kid, I was definitely not a solid comic collector. I was cutting them up when I saw something that I wanted. Now, one of the next Star Wars comics that I owned, it turns out, is a good example of how I've talked about how Marvel constantly, repeatedly released all of these Star Wars film adaptations in different forms. This is another one that's seen better days. This is one of those magazine-sized Marvel books releases of Return of the Jedi. It's essentially a trade paperback. What it does is it blows up the size of the regular comic art into a little bit bigger, and you've got all of it in one edition here. I mean, this is losing pages and stuff. It's not in that good a shape. And of course, me being a kid, I got stickers all over the back of it and stuff. The Power Lords, if anybody remembers those toys. Cards from the trading set. Every now and then you come across a sticker. Those are in there. I mean, I didn't really take great care of it, but this is one of the ways it tended to constantly be reprinted. Magazine sized, but nice and tough, not magazine floppy. One thing you might notice here, though, if you're going through, say, the Omnibus these days, this can all be found in the pages of Star Wars Omnibus a long time ago, Volume 4, by the way. One thing you might notice is that every now and then, from the original issues, you have these full-page story pages. Really cool. Luke, up there on the sail barge, attacking Jabba's minions. Very, very cool. There's another one of Han punching a biker scout as Leia and Luke take off on the speeder bike that they've just taken. But you don't get that in the collected editions. In the collected editions, it skips over that page. It goes straight from the sail barge to, Han! As Lando is falling and everything. They cut those out. None of the full-page images are included, nor are those art pages in the collected editions of Return of the Jedi. I was getting tripped up with the newspaper strips there. Revenge of the Jedi, the one that we saw a while back with Admiral Akbar. So, best place to get it these days is the Omnibus, and the Omnibus does include the individual issues reprinted, which means you do get those full-sized art and story pages, and it even includes the little bits in the back with the art one-sheet type of thing, which is kind of nice. Honestly, there's not really much to say about this adaptation. It stays very true to the film, even down to the dialogue in most cases. I mean, if there's anything that sticks out to me when I'm reading it, it is very faithful to the film, but at the same time, it feels rushed. It zips along a lot of the action sequences, because pretty much every image tends to have some text to go along with it to move that part of the narrative along. So it feels like it's a very rushed version of Return of the Jedi, but it does feel closer to the film than any of the other ones that we have seen previously coming from Marvel. So in that sense, they have managed to succeed in what they were trying to do and to recapture the flavor of the film. I think that Williamson's art works better in classic Star Wars than it does for the film adaptation, but that may just be the way that the color was added to it by Marvel early on and somewhat emulated in the Omnibus. So the big question, of course, is this series, Return of the Jedi, the miniseries, an essential read? As a miniseries of comics, no, of course not. Seeing the film is essential, this is not. And it's not as jarring as some of the other ones, so it is a decent read, but in and of itself, it's not something I think most fans will be picking up just for the heck of it to read, because most fans, at least watching this show, are looking for expanded universe materials and new stories, not just rehashes of the films. But for a rehash of the films, it's done fairly well. Just nothing really to write home about. One big thing of note to a lot of people when it comes to film adaptations, though, is where do they split the issues between the story points of the film? Basically, the first issue ends with them going out to the Sarlacc pit. The second issue ends right after Luke talks to the spirit of Obi-Wan, right before we get back to the Rebel fleet and such. The third issue ends right after Luke is reunited with Vader on Endor before being taken up to the Death Star. I mean, kind of normal cutting points, you would say, for the film. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.